Welcome to our evolutionary biology lecture. Today, we are going to explore one of the most profound and beautiful ideas in all of science, Darwinism. If you have ever wondered how the incredible diversity of life on Earth came to be, or how species perfectly adapt to their environments, you are in the right place. We will build this understanding from the ground up. To start, let us think about something familiar. Imagine you are a baker trying to make the perfect chocolate chip cookie. You bake 100 different batches, each with a slightly different recipe. Some are too salty, some are too sweet, but a few are absolutely delicious. If you only keep the recipes of the delicious ones and use them to bake your next 100 batches, over time, your cookies will become incredibly tasty. In nature, this exact same process happens. But instead of a baker choosing the best cookies, the environment chooses the organisms best suited to survive. This natural sorting process is the heart of Darwinism. Now that we have an intuitive grasp, let us look at the formal definition. Darwinism, proposed by Charles Darwin in the mid-19th century, states that all species arise and develop through the natural selection of small inherited variations. These variations increase an individual's ability to compete, survive, and reproduce. The theory rests on four main pillars: the overproduction of offspring, natural variation within a population, the struggle for existence, and differential survival and reproduction. Because resources are limited, competition is fierce. Individuals with traits better suited to their environment survive longer and leave more offspring, gradually modifying the population over vast periods of time. Understanding these pillars leads us to why this matters so much today. Darwinism is absolutely crucial because it is the unifying theory of all biological sciences. Without it, biology is just a disconnected list of facts about animals and plants, lacking any underlying logic. In the real world, we use these principles every single day in fields like medicine, agriculture, and conservation biology. For example, when bacteria evolve to become resistant to antibiotics, we are watching Darwinian natural selection happen in real time. If we did not understand this concept, we would not know how to develop new drugs or manage pest resistance, risking global health crises. To truly use this theory in science, we must move from concepts to mathematics. Biologists use a concept called fitness to quantify how well an organism survives and reproduces. This brings us to our first formula, where W equals 1 minus S. Conceptually, this formula tells us that an organism's fitness is reduced by the environmental pressures acting against it. The symbol W represents the relative fitness, which is a measure of reproductive success compared to the best performer. The symbol S represents the selection coefficient, measuring the strength of natural selection acting against that organism. The number 1 represents the maximum possible fitness. If the selection pressure S increases, the fitness W decreases, meaning survival is less likely. Now that we have our formula, let us see this with a concrete example. Imagine a forest where industrial pollution has darkened the tree trunks. Dark-colored peppered moths are camouflaged, producing an average of 120 surviving offspring. Light-colored moths are eaten by birds, producing only 90 surviving offspring. We need to find the relative fitness of the light moths. First, we identify the maximum fitness, which belongs to the dark moths. We assign them a baseline of 1. To find the relative fitness of the light moths, we divide their 90 offspring by the maximum of 120. This gives a final relative fitness of 0.75. This means light moths have only 75% of the reproductive success of dark moths. Having calculated the relative fitness, we can now derive the exact penalty the environment is applying. This chunk of our mathematical reasoning isolates the selection coefficient. We start with our original equation, W equals 1 minus S. By rearranging the terms algebraically, we solve for S, giving us S equals 1 minus W. This step is crucial because it translates biological survival into a strict mathematical penalty. We subtract the light moth's relative fitness of 0.75 from the maximum fitness of 1. This yields a selection coefficient of 0.25. Physically, this proves there is a 25% reduction in reproduction success due to bird predation, driving the population toward the darker color. Knowing who survives is not enough. We must predict future traits. This brings us to a powerful mathematical tool known as the breeder's equation. Conceptually, it connects the survival of the parents to the physical traits of their offspring. The formula is R equals H squared times S. The symbol R stands for the response to selection, which is how much the average trait changes in the next generation. The symbol H squared represents heritability, the proportion of the trait passed down through genes. Finally, S is the selection differential, the difference between the surviving, reproducing individuals and the original population. If heritability is 0, the population will not evolve, no matter how strong the selection pressure S is. Let us apply this new equation to a famous real-world scenario. On a remote Galapagos island, a severe drought leaves only large, hard seeds. The original population of finches has an average beak depth of 9.0 millimeters. The finches that actually survive and reproduce have an average beak depth of 10.0 millimeters. We need to find the selection differential. We subtract the original average of 9.0 from the survivor's average of 10.0. This gives a final selection differential of 1.0 millimeter. Physically, this means the reproducing birds have beaks that are 1 millimeter larger than the general population because the environment filtered out the smaller beaked birds. Now that we have the selection differential, we can calculate the actual evolutionary response. We are given that the heritability of beak depth is 0.6. We plug our values into the breeder's equation to see how much of the 1 millimeter change is actually passed on to the offspring. We multiply the heritability of 0.6 by the selection differential of 1.0. This step is necessary because not all of the parent's large beak size is due to genetics. Some might be environmental. By multiplying by heritability, we isolate only the genetic change. The final answer is an evolutionary response of 0.6 millimeters for the next generation. So we have proven that the trait changes by 0.6 millimeters. This brings us to our final mathematical deduction, finding the actual beak size of the new generation. We establish that the new generation average, mu2, must equal the original population average, mu1, plus the evolutionary response, R. The mathematical reasoning here is simple addition, but the intuition is profound. Evolution builds upon the previous generation's baseline. We add the response of 0.6 millimeters to the original 9.0 millimeters. This yields 9.6 millimeters. This physically demonstrates Darwinism in action. The new generation is born with larger beaks, perfectly adapted to cracking hard seeds during a drought. To visualize everything we have just calculated, Let us look at this graph of directional natural selection. On the horizontal axis, we have the trait value, such as beak size. On the vertical axis, we have the number of individuals. The dashed blue bell curve represents our original population. Notice the red-shaded region on the left. These are the individuals with smaller beaks that did not survive the drought. Because they were filtered out, the entire population shifts. The solid green curve shows the new generation, centered on a larger average trait value. The black arrow connecting the peaks represents the evolutionary response, R, that we just calculated. This diagram perfectly captures how environmental pressure drives physical change. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us summarize the most important ideas. First, Darwinism is the fundamental principle driving adaptation. It relies on the logic that individuals with advantageous heritable traits will survive and reproduce more successfully. Second, we learned that evolution is not just a concept, it can be measured. Fitness calculations reveal the exact mathematical penalty the environment applies to disadvantageous traits. Finally, using the breeder's equation, we can accurately predict how a species will physically change in the next generation. You now have a solid understanding of how the relentless, invisible hand of natural selection shapes every living thing on Earth, including ourselves. Great job today.